A deafening explosion split the jungle, shaking the canopy of alien trees until their luminescent leaves shimmered like green-blue fire. The ground quivered under Dante Rourke's boots as he tore through the undergrowth, his breath sharp, his muscles burning. Rain hissed against the foliage, acid rain eating holes into broad fronds, pitting his armor. A jagged shard of metal, still glowing from the blast, jutted from his shoulder. Pain roared in his nerves, but he didn't slow. Behind him, something vast and hungry crashed through the brush, snapping trunks like matchsticks. His eyes flicked in rapid, instinctive calculations. Dante's gift, his curse, was the ability to fracture a single second into slices thin as paper, to live in the space between ticks of a clock. In that suspended time, he could trace the arc of a predator's leap, count the flex of a muscle, map the chemical makeup of flesh and bone. The world slowed now as he pushed the skill to its limit, the acid raindrops drifting past like lazy beads of glass. Every detail sharpened, the burn of ozone, the glow of fungal blooms clinging to trunks, the rhythmic thump of footfalls closing in. A shadow dropped from the canopy. 4 meters of corded muscle and carapace hit the ground in a shower of shredded leaves. A predator chimera. 6 clawed limbs dug into the earth, its head a grotesque fusion of feline jaws and insect mandibles. From between those jagged plates, it spewed a skein of filament, glistening strands laced with corrosive spores that hissed where they landed, carving pits into the soil. Dante twisted aside, his slowed perception mapping the spread of the filaments before they struck. His left hand shot to a vine, a deep violet coil clinging to a trunk, and tore it free in one savage pull. The vine writhed faintly, exuding a pungent, acrid scent. He uked it in his grip, twisting it into a crude spearhead. The pores on its surface wept clear droplets that smoked when they hit the ground. The chimera lunged again, its bulk blotting out the greenish light. Dante stepped into the moment, every movement deliberate. He pivoted, bringing the vine spear up under its jaw, driving with all his weight. The toxic fibers punctured chitin, sank deep. The creature screamed, a sound like metal tearing and convulsed. Its limbs thrashed, gouging furrows in the earth, then locked stiff. Dante yanked the spear free, just as the chimera's body ruptured. It didn't bleed. Instead, a billowing cloud of luminescent spores exploded outward, fine as smoke, shimmering gold and green. The cloud enveloped him before he could leap clear. He held his breath, but too late. The spores pressed into his skin, his nose, his lungs, sliding into him like cold fingers. The jungle vanished. For a heartbeat, there was only darkness. Then a voice, not sound, but a vibration in his skull, spoke. Volt Aegis, 72 hours remaining. The words resonated in his bones, alien yet comprehensible. Each syllable carried an urgency that made his pulse quicken. The darkness flickered, resolving into ghost images, a massive steel door half buried in roots, a sky burning with auroras, a countdown ticking away in crimson light. Dante staggered, vision snapping back to the jungle's glow. He sucked in a breath, the spores burning in his lungs. His shoulder throbbed where the metal shard still smoldered. He rasped aloud, more to himself than anyone, "Who is in my head?" The voice answered, steady, inevitable. The last, or no one at all. Something heavy moved beyond the tree line, unseen but circling. The jungle's sounds shifted, the chitter of insect things stilled, the constant rustle of vine serpents muted. Even the rain seemed to pause. Dante clenched his jaw, tasting iron. His gift thrummed, offering him the option to stretch another second to see what was coming before it struck. But every use cost him nosebleeds, migraines, the slow erosion of his mind. He could feel that toll in the trembling of his fingers. The shard in his shoulder pulsed with residual heat, a reminder of the blast that had started this chase. It had been no accident. Someone or something had driven that chimera toward him. The voice in his head, the countdown, the predator, none of it was random. He crouched, scanning the ground. The soil here was mottled with pale growths, fungal patches that released faint threads of steam. The threads curled toward him, following his heat. If he stayed too long, they would root into his skin. The voice returned, softer but no less insistent. Volt Aegis, 72 hours. The repetition wasn't exact. The inflection carried something else this time, a shadow of warning. Dante spat into the steaming soil, forcing his breathing under control. If you've got something to say, he muttered, say it before I start ignoring you. Silence. Only the hiss of rain burning holes in leaves. Then, faintly, they are coming! His stomach knotted. He didn't know who they were, but instinct told him this was the kind of threat you didn't wait around to meet. He shifted the vine spear in his hand, feeling the slick, poisonous sap seep between his fingers. Above, the canopy trembled. A shape moved fast, too fast for any Earth predator, but not a chimera. Different weight, different cadence. Dante exhaled slowly, letting his mind fracture time once more. The world slowed to a crawl. Droplets hung mid-air, steam curled in arrested spirals, and from the branches above, the silhouette of a figure emerged, humanoid, but wrong. The limbs too long, the head a smooth, featureless dome. He didn't wait to see if it would speak. The spear left his hand in a perfect arc, spinning toward the figure. In the stretched seconds, he saw the figure twist aside with unnatural grace, the spear skimming past. The creature dropped from the branch without a sound, landing on the vine-laced earth before him. Dante's time sense snapped back to normal. The creature straightened, the reins sliding off its obsidian skin without leaving marks. 72 hours, it said, not in his mind, but aloud in a voice like cracking stone. And you're already late. The acid rain fell harder, and somewhere in the trees something screamed. The jungle steamed in the aftermath of the acid rain, droplets sizzling where they struck the alien foliage. Dante Rourke moved carefully through the undergrowth, every step measured, every sound behind him catalogued. The voices in his head had faded to a faint echo, but the message remained, etched into his thoughts like a scar. Vault ages, 72 hours. He knew enough to understand that time mattered now, and time was the one thing humanity no longer had. Once he had been the man people called when disaster was inevitable. Commander of the Bio-Response Unit. He had dropped into worlds already burning, where alien pathogens turned the air to poison and the ground to traps. His team had been good, damn good, until Z-42. The comet had looked harmless enough in the first scans, a drifting rock streaking past the outer colonies. When it broke apart in orbit, scattering glittering debris across the upper atmosphere, no one imagined it would carry the death of a species. 6 months later, 99% of humanity was gone. The rest were the ones like Dante, stubborn enough to survive, lucky enough to avoid infection, and ruthless enough to kill when it mattered. He didn't speak about Z-42 anymore. He didn't talk about the day the spores fell like snow, clinging to skin and clothes, or about the moment he gave the order to seal the blast doors, trapping half his squad inside with the contagion. But at night, in the few hours when he slept, he saw their faces, burned into his mind in that last instant before the steel shut them away. The forest opened slightly, revealing a shallow crater littered with fragments of scorched metal. The smell of ozone and something sweet like overripe fruit hung in the humid air. Dante's eyes scanned the scene, and his gaze locked on the blackened hulk at the center, a satellite, cracked open like an egg. Its casing was warped, but the core, a squat cylinder with an antenna, remained intact. He crouched, brushing away a slick of glowing moss, and found the panel. His fingers traced the markings, worn but familiar. Military make. Not human, not entirely. There were design elements he recognized from integrated tech recovered during the Andros Treaty years. He pulled his knife, prying at the seams until the cylinder came free with a reluctant snap. The moment his hand closed around it, the voice surged again in his skull. Vault, Aegis, 72 hours, coordinates transmitting. At the same time, the device in his hand vibrated faintly, a thin green line blinking across a cracked screen. The numbers resolved into coordinates. His pulse spiked. Vault? Aegis was more than a myth then. It was real, and it was close enough to reach if he moved fast. He barely had time to process before the satellite husk shifted with a faint scritch. Scritch. From a fissure in the metal, a slick, glistening shape forced its way out. Then another. And another. Within seconds, a swarm of chitinous insects, each no larger than a finger joint, boiled across the satellite's surface. Their bodies shimmered like oil, legs tipped with fine hooks that clung to everything they touched. One landed on his wrist. Its mandibles clicked once, twice, and then it bit. The pain was immediate and electric, racing up his arm. More of them skidded over his boots, his knees, his hip. Dante swore, flinging the device into the crook of his elbow and ripping at the fastenings of his jacket. The insects weren't just biting. They were digging, their hooked legs anchoring as they searched for heat and flesh. He yanked the jacket halfway off, but 3 of them had already breached the fabric at his forearm, disappearing into the folds like living needles. There was no time to think. He grabbed for the violet vine coiled over a nearby branch. With a twist and pull, he snapped it free, crushing its bulbous root in his fist until the sap welled up, viscous, sharp-smelling. He slashed his own forearm with his knife, drawing a line of blood, then smeared the sap into the cut. The reaction was instant. The air filled with a hiss, the insects on his skin convulsing as the mixture of human blood and vine toxins seared them. Pain flared hot and raw, but Dante held the wound open until the last of the creatures fell away, twitching in the dirt. His breathing slowed, the pounding in his ears fading. He wiped the blade on his thigh, slid it back into its sheath, and retrieved the transmitter. The green light still blinked, patient and steady. Coordinates! Vault Aegis! He stared at it for a long moment, rainwater and sweat stinging his eyes. If this is the last shot, he muttered under his breath, I'm not letting it slip into anyone else's hands. Not again! The jungle around him seemed to lean closer, listening. Somewhere in the canopy, a branch snapped, followed by the low, deliberate rumble of something breathing. Dante slid the transmitter into a pouch, tightened the strap across his chest, and adjusted his grip on the vine spear. The wound in his arm throbbed in time with his heartbeat, but he ignored it. He had 72 hours. After that, the voice hadn't said. It didn't have to. Dante moved deeper into the jungle, the canopy above thick enough to smother daylight into a murky green haze. Every step took him into stranger territory. Flowers the size of his head tracked his movement, petals parting to reveal clusters of black, unblinking eyes. Vines as thick as his arm curled and flexed like muscle under skin, shifting aside or tightening into knots when he passed too close. The ground itself rose and fell in shallow breaths, exhaling bursts of warm, damp air through cracks that steamed in the acidic humidity. Everything here felt alive in a way that was wrong. No distinction between plant and animal, only one relentless will to survive and consume. He kept his pace steady, eyes scanning the terrain, mind measuring distance to the coordinates blinking on the cracked transmitter in his pocket. The voice in his head had gone quiet again, but its urgency lingered. 72 hours. Less now. Something rustled ahead, low to the ground. Dante froze, one hand on the vine spear slung across his back. The sound grew, a rhythmic scrape and shuffle, then stopped. He waited, breath held. From the shadows beneath a root arch it emerged, a hulking, sinewy creature, its body a grotesque fusion of predator and parasite. 3 heads rose from a single torso, each with a different shape, one lupine, one reptilian, one vaguely insectoid. Their eyes glowed faint amber. Draped across its shoulders and spine was something else entirely, a lattice of translucent membranes pulsing faintly with light, as though a second entity was living inside it. The creature's movements were wrong for something that large, too controlled, too deliberate. When it spoke, the sound didn't come from its mouth, but from everywhere at once, a layered resonance that made the air feel heavier. You move toward the vault. Dante didn't lower his weapon. I am. The thing tilted one head, the other staying perfectly still. It is guarded by the sentinel. You will not reach it. I've heard worse odds. The resonance deepened, almost amused. This is not a threat you have faced before. Sentinel is not beast or machine. It is war, given form. It will unmake you in less than a breath. That is its design. Dante kept his gaze fixed on the central head. Then it'll have to work for it. The membranes across its back shifted, and he realized what he was seeing. A parasite with its own intelligence, riding the Chimera like a living mount. The parasite spoke again, its tone cooling. You do not understand. If you step closer, your death will serve nothing. The vault's guardians were built to erase intruders from existence. No trace, no remains, no memory. Even your failure will be forgotten. Then I guess I'd better make it quick, Dante said. The creatures' heads turned in unison, eyes narrowing. There are others on the path. They hear the same call you do. But they are not like you. They were human once, your soldiers. They are more dangerous now. The words hit harder than he wanted to admit. What did you say? Your squad? Those you left behind at Z-42? They did not die. They adapted. Images flashed through his mind, the day he sealed the blast doors, the pounding of fists on steel, the muffled shouts. He had told himself it was mercy better, a quick death than the slow burn of the spores. Now, the idea that they had survived, twisted into something else, made his gut tighten. The parasite's voice softened, almost persuasive. They will not welcome you. They will not see you as their commander, only as the man who abandoned them. Then I'll deal with them like I deal with anything else in my way, Dante said, but his jaw was clenched, the words bitter in his mouth. You cannot win against them all. Dante's grip tightened on his spear. I don't need to win against them all. I just need to get there first. A long silence followed. The parasite studied him through its host's triple gaze. Then it said, If you continue, you will die. Die now, Dante replied, voice low. Or die when it's over. What's the difference? The parasite didn't answer. One by one, the heads turned away, and the Chimera retreated into the shadows without another sound, as if melting into the jungle itself. Dante stayed still until the last glimmer of amber eyes vanished. Then he exhaled, feeling the tension bleed from his shoulders in a slow trickle. The jungle sounds returned, the hiss of rain on distant leaves, the whisper of moving vines. Somewhere ahead, muffled through the breathing earth, came the faint echo of footsteps, too heavy, too coordinated for any native predator. He knew without seeing, the hybrids. His mind reached back unbidden to the faces of his old squad, and he forced the memories down. Whatever they were now, they weren't his soldiers anymore. They were an obstacle, and obstacles were meant to be removed. He adjusted his grip on the spear and kept walking, deeper into the living maze, toward a vault that might hold salvation, or the end of whatever was left of him. The jungle was breathing around him, its constant shifting and murmuring a low warning Dante had learned to read. Still, nothing in its rhythms prepared him for how quickly the air changed, how one moment it was only the hiss of distant acid rain, and the next it was the subtle ripple of movement in every direction at once. He froze, grip tightening on the vine spear. A faint, metallic click echoed through the undergrowth. Then they emerged. Figures broke from the foliage in a coordinated rush, their silhouettes human enough to twist something in his chest before the details registered. Skin the color of old bronze or stretched over shifting plates of chitin. Eyes glowed with a cold bioluminescence. Muscle cords intertwined with vine-like tendons pulsed faintly under translucent patches of flesh. Each one carried a weapon grown rather than forged spines, blades, and claws fused seamlessly with their bodies. At their head strode a figure Dante knew instantly, Corin. Once a second in command, the one he trusted to keep the squad moving when he was pinned down, the one who had stood at his side during the siege of Helios Station. Corin's face was still there, framed by a crown of ridged bone and threaded with vascular tendrils. His eyes were the same green they had been on Titan, too human, too aware. "Dante Rourke!" Corin said, his voice carrying the deep resonance of something speaking through him, yet layered with his own tone. "You made it farther than I expected." Dante kept his weapon raised. "Corin." The hybrids fanned out, surrounding him in a loose arc. Their movements were precise, disciplined. Still soldiers at the core, Corin stopped a few paces away, the faint tremor of insectoid limbs beneath his armor-like hide betraying tension. "You left us," Corin said, the words quiet but razor-sharp. "You sealed the doors." We pounded on them, shouted until our throats tore. "And you turned away. You think I don't remember?" Dante said, his voice low. Corin's lip curled, revealing teeth that ended in pointed enamel. "You remember the lie you told yourself, that you were saving the rest, that we were already dead, but we didn't die, Dante. We adapted. We became something more." The other hybrids shifted, weapons twitching in their hands, feeding off the charge in the air. Dante's mind raced. They could strike all at once, overwhelming him before he could react. He needed to see their weaknesses, structural flaws, unarmored joints, vulnerabilities in the hybrid biology. But that meant using his gift, and each time he did, the backlash took more from him. Corin stepped closer. "Vault Aegis isn't for you. It isn't for the relics who cling to a dead species. It's for the future, our future. I'm not here to debate philosophy," Dante said. "Then you're here to die." The hybrids moved. Dante pulled the world into slow motion. His perception fractured the moment into shards, each detail caught in crystal clarity, the twitch of a clawed finger, the dilation of Corin's pupils, the subtle sway of a hybrid's weapon toward his blind side. He tracked the lines of force in their limbs, the microflex of armor plates, the flow of blood beneath chitin. Every weakness was there if he pushed deep enough. Pain flared in his skull, hot and sharp. His nose began to bleed, crimson drops hanging in the slowed air like suspended rubies. The roar of blood in his ears dulled into silence, his hearing collapsing under the strain. He moved. The spear swung low, catching the leading hybrid in the knee joint where bone met vine fiber muscle. It screamed, toppling sideways. Dante pivoted, driving an elbow into another's throat, feeling the cartilage give. Time snapped forward, sound crashing back like a tidal wave. The jungle erupted in shouts, the hiss of weapons, the crack of bodies colliding. Corin came in fast, his movements an uncanny blend of human training and alien fluidity. Dante blocked a downward strike with the spear shaft, the impact reverberating up his arms. A claw raked across his side, tearing fabric and skin. "You can't win this," Corin growled, driving him back. Dante ducked under a slash, sweeping the spear in a tight arc to keep the others at bay. His vision blurred, but he focused on Corin, on the pattern of motion in the hybrid's body. Beneath the layers of mutation, the spine still followed a human structure, the nervous system still vulnerable where it met the base of the skull. He reached for the violet coil on his belt, fingers slick with sweat and blood. With a snap, he looped it around Corin's throat, yanking hard. The vine writhed in his grip, its thorns biting into flesh. Corin snarled, clawing at the coil, but Dante was already pulling a thin spike from the vine's end, a natural syringe, filled with the paralytic venom he'd harvested days ago. Corin's eyes widened as Dante drove the spike into the narrow gap between vertebrae at the base of his neck. The venom worked fast. Corin's limbs jerked once, twice, then locked. The hybrids froze, their leaders collapsed, halting their momentum. Dante lowered him to the ground. The crown of bone on Corin's head glistened with rain, his breath coming in shallow pulls. For a moment, the alien resonance in his voice faltered, leaving only the man Dante had known. "Vault," Corin whispered, his voice fraying. "Not for humans." Dante's grip tightened on the vine, every muscle in him screaming to finish it, but the venom was already spreading, and Corin's gaze was dimming. "I'm sorry," Dante said, not sure if he meant it for Corin, for himself, or for all of them. The hybrid's eyes closed. His body went slack. Around them the others backed away, their formation breaking. None spoke. None attacked. They melted into the jungle's breathing shadows, leaving Dante alone with the weight of the kill. He stayed crouched there, rain pattering against his back, the vine limp in his hands. The transmitter in his pocket kept blinking, steady and relentless. Vault Aegis was still ahead, and the road to it had just cost him the life of someone he'd already lost once. When he finally stood, he didn't look back. The jungle thinned into a wide, scorched clearing where nothing grew but brittle stalks of blackened grass. Dante stepped onto the cracked ground, boots crunching over a layer of dried husks that might once have been trees or something far stranger. The air was heavy with static, prickling his skin as though the atmosphere itself was watching him. Then the watching became literal. A shadow fell across the clearing. From behind a ridge of fused stone and root, the sentinel emerged. 6 meters of living armor, its body a terrible marriage of reptilian muscle and insect precision. Plates of iridescent chitin flexed over a framework of cables that pulsed with faint light. Its movements were disturbingly methodical, no wasted energy, every step measured. The head was a blunt wedge, studded with sensor pits, mandibles clicking in a rhythm too deliberate to be animal. Dante froze, studying it, knowing it was doing the same. The sentinel's head tilted slightly, and in that moment he understood. It wasn't just looking. It was reading him, analyzing his stance, the tension in his grip, even the micro-adjustments of his balance. Every technique he'd ever used, every trick, was being catalogued and, in seconds, countered. It came at him in a blur. Dante dropped into his slowed perception, the world stretching wide. The sentinel's claws tore through where he'd been standing, the wind of its strike slamming into his ribs. He rolled, spear flashing upward, but the sentinel twisted, armor plate sliding to block the thrust before it landed. Then it countered, sweeping a hind leg with a speed no 6-meter mash should possess, and the blow launched him into the dirt. He staggered to his feet, spitting blood. The thing was perfect, adapting not just to his moves, but to the sidea of his moves. One man against this was suicide. The sound reached him before the sight, a hum of repulsor engines, fading into the low thud of heavy boots. A figure emerged from the haze at the edge of the clearing, tall and broad, encased in composite armor, patched with scars from a dozen worlds. A helmet of segmented metal hid his face, but the way he moved, casual, predatory, made the threat clear. "Rourke!" The voice inside the helmet was deep, metallic, accented in a way Dante didn't recognize. "You're chasing the vault!" Dante didn't answer. The sentinel had paused, its sensor pits swiveling between them, calculating. The newcomer held out one gauntleted hand in a mock gesture of peace. "Name's K. Var. I'm here for it too, but you and I both know that thing will rip us apart before either of us gets close." Dante's eyes narrowed. "And you're suggesting, what, a team-up?" "Temporary," Kale said. "Once the sentinel's down, we go our separate ways. Winner takes the vault. And you expect me to trust you? I expect you to be smart enough to know you don't have a choice." The sentinel's head twitched as though impatient. Dante weighed his options. Alone, he'd be dead in minutes. With KL, maybe he'd survive long enough to figure out a way through. He didn't need to like the man. He just needed him breathing until the sentinel wasn't. "Fine," Dante said. "But when this is over—" "When this is over," Kyle interrupted, "only one of us walks away with it." They didn't have time for more. The sentinel lunged, claws tearing furrows in the earth. Kyle darted left, drawing its attention with a barrage of plasma bolts from a shoulder-mounted cannon. Dante moved right, using the distraction to circle toward the creature's flank. "Hit it low!" Kale's voice crackled in Dante's ear as the cannon fire glanced off the sentinel's armor. "Leg joints, where the plates overlap." Dante spotted the weakness. Thin seams between armor segments flexing as the limb shifted. He grabbed a hanging vine streaked with bioluminescent lines, jamming its frayed end into a crack in the earth where wetness seeped up. The vine convulsed, releasing a surge of stored charge. The sentinel's leg came down on it. Lightning ripped up its limb, arcing between plates. It staggered, but recovered almost instantly, twisting to bring its head around. Kale was already moving, hurling a canister that burst in midair into a cloud of shimmering spores. The sentinel's sensors pulsed, its movements slowing as it recalibrated. Dante took the chance, sprinting forward to a cluster of bulbous plants trembling in the heat. He sliced one open with his spear, releasing a gout of volatile gas. "Now!" he shouted. Kale's next shot ignited the gas, the explosion washing fire over the sentinel's side. Chitting cracked, cables blackened, but the thing roared and charged through the flames faster than before. It hit Kale full force, sending him skidding across the clearing. Dante dove aside as the sentinel's claws slammed into the ground where he'd stood. His slowed perception flickered in and out, the strain making his vision pulse black at the edges. He needed something stronger than what they'd thrown at it so far. "Draw it to the swamp," he yelled. Kale grunted, hauling himself upright. "You better know what you're doing." They ran, weaving between outcroppings of fused root and stone, the sentinel smashing through in pursuit. The ground grew softer, the air thicker with the stench of rot. Ahead, the swamp stretched out, pools of corrosive sludge ringed with brittle reeds. Dante skidded to a stop at the edge, jabbing his spear into the mud to test the depth. "We take out the supports under its weight," he said. "You keep it busy. I'll set the trap." Kale didn't argue. He opened fire again, forcing the sentinel to shift toward him. Dante moved fast, slashing through root clusters that held a crust of earth in place, exposing the quagmire beneath. The sentinel lunged at Kale, its bulk carrying it onto the weakened ground. Dante jammed the vine spear deep into a fissure and twisted, releasing a pulse from the plant's charged fibers. The swamp erupted, the top layer collapsing in a rush of sucking mud and corrosive fluid. The sentinel dropped, its legs sinking, thrashing to find purchase. Kale didn't wait. He fired a final shot directly into one of the exposed seams. The impact sent a shock through the creature, its armor plates locking in spasm. Dante moved in, driving the spear into the same wound, twisting until he felt the resistance give. A screech, unlike anything human or alien, tore through the air. Then the sentinel went still. Steam rose from the swamp, the only sound their breathing. Kale pulled off his helmet, revealing a scarred face and eyes that held nothing but calculation. "When this is done," he said, voice flat, "the vault is mine." Dante wiped blood from his mouth, meeting his gaze. "If you're still alive," he said, "you won't want it any more." Kale smirked, but there was something in his eyes, a flicker of unease as they turned toward the looming shape of vault, aegis in the distance. The swamp still steamed from the sentinel's fall, bubbles rising in lazy bursts from beneath its hulking body. Dante stood on the spongy ground, chest heaving, every muscle shaking from the fight. Kale circled warily, his visor turned toward the still form, weapon ready in case the thing had one last attack in it. But Dante knew from the way its plates had gone slack, the faint ripple of its cables fading, that it was finished. The final strike had been pure instinct, rushing forward when Kale was thrown back, forcing himself past the reach of claws that could still crush him. He'd driven the vine spear deep into the exposed seam, twisting until he felt it pierce the core beneath. Releasing the venom in a single, decisive burst, the sentinel's shriek had rattled his bones before it collapsed, sinking halfway into the mire and clearing the way to the vault. The entrance rose from the earth like the jaw of some ancient beast, twin slabs of alloy and stone fused with root and vine, flanked by statues that might once have been human figures but were now eroded into alien shapes. A deep rumble rolled through the ground as the doors responded to some silent signal, splitting apart to reveal a tunnel of polished black. Dante stepped in first, Kale's footsteps echoing behind him. The air inside was cold, dry, and utterly still, a stark contrast to the living chaos outside. They descended a series of ramps into a central chamber, lit by soft, pulsating lines along the floor. In the center stood a cylindrical console, its surface alive with scrolling data and languages Dante half recognized. From pre-collapse archives, holographic panels bloomed in the air as he approached, lines of genetic code and human silhouettes rotating slowly. "This is it," Kyle said, voice low with something between awe and greed. "The genetic archive, the reset button." Dante scanned the displays. Vault Aegis contained full genomic maps for humanity, along with the nanotech protocols to reconstitute living hosts. But the system was designed for one activation only, and the population cap was clear: 10,000 viable humans. No retries, no corrections. The thought hit him like a blow. This was enough to restart a species, but only barely. Kale stepped forward, gesturing at the interface. We picked the best stock. Physically fit, genetically clean, no inherited flaws. Start the new world with the strongest foundation possible. Dante turned to him slowly. You want to handpick who lives and who doesn't. That's the only way it survives, Kyle said without hesitation. No politics, no sentiment. Just survival of the fittest. That's not survival, Dante said. That's tyranny. The people left out there, the ones who fought to stay alive this long, they deserve the choice. All of them. Kale laughed once, humorless. And what if they choose wrong? What if they fill the future with weakness? Dante's jaw tightened. The future doesn't belong to the strongest. It belongs to those who remember what it cost to get here. For a moment they stood in silence, the hum of the vault filling the space between them. Then Kale's hand drifted toward the control node. Dante moved first. A sharp pivot of his foot, a snap of his elbow, and Kale staggered back, helmet cracking against the console's edge. Before he could recover, Dante slammed the butt of his spear into the side of his head, dropping him to the floor. Dante didn't waste time. He called up the data core, hands moving across the holographic keys. The vault's protocols resisted, but his fingers found the override buried in the old military code, probably the same one used by the people who built this place. A progress bar began to crawl across the display as the entire archive, copied into the compact drive clipped to his belt. Kale stirred, groaning, but stayed down. Dante watched the bar reach completion, then turned to the primary console. His eyes rested on the activation key, the single command that would decide who was reborn and who stayed lost forever. Slowly he withdrew a charge from his pack, primed it, and set it into the console's housing. The vault's hum changed pitch, confusion rippling through the holograms as systems began to fail. Kale's head came up, eyes wide. What are you doing? Making sure no one can use this to play God, Dante said. You're insane. The charge detonated with a muffled thump, the console's light dying instantly. The vault went dark, except for the dim glow of the path they had entered on. Dante clipped the drive to his belt, feeling its weight like a promise and a burden both. Kale cursed, dragging himself to his feet. You've just destroyed humanity's only chance. Dante met his gaze without flinching. No, I've just made sure it stays in the hands of the people it belongs to. He stepped past the hunter toward the exit. The future doesn't belong to the strongest, he added, voice steady. It belongs to the ones who remember. Kale didn't follow. The vault's doors closed behind Dante with a deep, final rumble, sealing away whatever was left inside. Outside, the jungle waited, alive and hostile, but for the first time in years, Dante felt something like direction. He had the key to humanity's rebirth, and he would decide when and with whom it was used. The days after the vault were a blur of movement, distance, and silence. Dante left no trail, avoiding every settlement, every wandering patrol. When the storms came, he moved through them. When the predators hunted, he slipped past their senses, as if he were nothing but a shadow. Those who later claimed to have seen him described only fragments, a lone figure with a vine spear strapped across his back, eyes that seemed to weigh everything and commit nothing. The jungle seemed to bend around him as though it recognized one of its own. In the months that followed, rumors took root among the scattered pockets of survivors. They whispered about the keeper of the Aegis key, a man who had reached the heart of the world, who had faced the Sentinel and lived, who had held the power to rebuild humanity in his hands and walked away. Some said he had destroyed the vault to keep it from tyrants. Others insisted he had hidden its contents somewhere unreachable. A few swore he had given the key to a council of survivors, though no one could name a single council member. The stories grew in the telling. In some, Dante was a savior, in others, a coward who refused to do what needed to be done. A few painted him as a warlord, building his own chosen future in secret. But no matter the version, one truth endured: no one could find him, and without him, the vault's promise was beyond reach. Long after his disappearance, a battered notebook surfaced in the markets of a reclaimed city. Its leather cover was burned at the edges, its pages warped by moisture. Inside, the handwriting was careful, deliberate. There was no signature, but the words were enough for those who had heard the stories to believe. Power is not the ability to decide who lives and who dies. It is the will to live with a choice that costs you everything. If you must join hands with the one who once hunted you to save a world, make certain you understand why. Survival bought without reason is just another kind of death. The notebook was passed from hand to hand, copied and memorized until its pages finally fell apart. Its words, however, outlived the paper, carried across settlements like a quiet oath. Leaders quoted it in speeches. Drifters carved its lines into stone markers at the edges of dangerous territory. It became less a statement from a man and more a challenge to those who might follow, to question the price of victory before paying it. Yet the question at the heart of the writing unsettled more than it inspired. What would you do if, to keep humanity alive, you had to entrust its future to people you did not believe in? Around campfires and in fortified halls, the answers were argued, shouted, and sometimes fought over. Some claimed they would rather die than gamble the fate of their kind on the unworthy. Others said that survival itself was worth any risk. In those debates, Dante's shadow lingered. Some hunters swore they'd glimpsed him years later, far from the vault's resting place. One claimed to have seen him standing at the edge of a canyon where the ground shimmered with bioluminescent moss, the glow painting strange patterns across his face. Another told of a man matching his description trading for food in a storm-racked port, vanishing before anyone could speak his name aloud. Whether these were truths or just the jungle playing tricks didn't matter. The myth fed itself. In the end, it was the image more than the man that survived, a lone figure in the alien wilderness, blue-green light glinting off eyes that had seen the death of a world and chosen not to rebuild it in his own image. A hand closed around a device small enough to vanish into a pocket, yet heavy enough to carry the last spark of an entire species. He stood, not as a conqueror or a savior, but as a keeper, someone who understood that the greatest power was the choice not to use it. The jungle closed behind him as he moved, its breath on the wind, its pulse in the roots under his feet. The predators watched from the shadows but did not strike. In the distance, storms boiled over the horizon, their glow reflected in his gaze. Somewhere ahead lay the next decision, the next impossible choice, and he walked toward it without hesitation. Dante Rourke disappeared into the living green, and the world kept whispering his name.